This film has been years in the making.
Yes.
How many years have you been working on it?
I was saying 4, but I've done some math, and I think it's actually 5.
All right, so 5 years.
Yes.
So how did the initial concept come about for the film?
So, I went to law school,
Right.
and when I was in law school, I was really into criminal law. I was sitting with a judge on the bench in New York City, and I watched a couple of sexual assault cases. It made me so depressed that I dropped out of law school, moved to LA. I was like, I'm gonna be a filmmaker, I'm gonna make fun stuff. And then I met Emma, and I was so taken with her talent, and she was expressing to me that as an actor, she was really ready to start having a little more creative control of her projects. And sort of around the same time, we had realized that we had a huge overlap in our interest in the flaws in our laws and the way that sexual assault is prosecuted. And we were so fascinated with the subject that we started a book club called Feminist Book Club, and we met like once a month, did a lot of reading, but Emma and I were talking every night, talking through the weekend, and the next thing I know, I'm holding a camera, I'm pointing it at her, we're in that creepy alley, completely by ourselves at 2 a.m., trying to go into places with a camera and discover a story. And working from like a very organic process of discovering filmmaking, from inhabiting a space and going there and being there physically with our bodies, and then going back the next week and writing a scene based on our discoveries. And we had gotten so much footage that at a certain point, Marcus Dunstan, fantastic horror writer and director, Emma's been in several of his films, he had caught wind of what we were doing, and he saw some of our footage, and he sat us down and he was like, so, I want to talk to you about the fact that you're making a movie, and I've seen the footage and it's a really good movie. And we're like, I don't know about that. And and he was like, no, I think that you should get some money to hire a couple people to help you. And we're like, what is this money of which you speak? We don't know what that is. And so next thing we knew, we were driving to Vegas and pitching a financier who wrote us wrote us a check for just enough money where we could look people dead in the eye and be like, we're making a movie. And so we're like, well, I guess we better write a legit script that other people can actually follow. So we wrote what our line producer was like, you wrote a $2 million movie. And we were like, well, we're gonna shoot it for SAG ultra low budget, and we're only gonna work with one union. He's like, we are so fucked. But I had so much patience, and Emma and Angela and Karina and so many people came here tonight with me that have all worked on the movie for free for years. What I had was patience, and I had time. And the cast did such a phenomenal job bringing the story to life. That it made it really hard to give up on it when you're sitting with that footage on your hard drive in your office, and you're just staring at those faces of the sisters doing that argument, and you're like, God, I gotta I gotta make it happen to somehow pay for score. I have to somehow just bring it across the finish line. And that's sort of our lightning in the bottle.
When you said you drove to Vegas to get financing, I had a different thing in mind.
Yeah.
I put 20 on red, we're gonna get the money for this movie. So Emma, prior to this film, had you had any experience writing for a screenplay or
No,
stories?
mostly all my writing experience was in music, and I specifically remember Gia just being like, hey, I got a camera, what else are you gonna do, so it was super organic, and I feel like that's the heart of it shows up on screen even 5 years later, where we showed up and we showed out and we did the most, and I don't think that ever expired, even when we got a little bit of money, thankfully, and we got the support of so many people. I think it always translated that we were just all out there to tell the same story. So
right, and you were filming in LA, which is always cheap.
Well, everything has a cost, my friend.
So tell us a little bit about, I heard a little bit about this, your work in the barrel of water.
Yeah.
And what was that like? Tell us about that experience.
Which barrel? Which time? No, it was cold, I guess. I don't know. I specifically remember Gia's husband, David, who's also an editor and a financier on this film, bringing up boiling pots of water and dumping it into the barrel. I mean, it's LA, so it's not that cold, but it was cold, right? It was unseasonably cold, I would say.
She's freezing cold.
I would say it was unseasonably cold.
I heard a little story about your finger.
I had a finger that died for a moment, and I.
Too cold.
Well, we didn't know, you know. I was in a barrel for many hours, and then I was showering off, and I was like, Gia, my finger's gray. Something's wrong. Like the rest of my fingers are red from the water, and this one is gray. Should we do something about that? She was like, I have the number for 911. Give me a moment. Yeah.
So one of my questions is, you know, the film is written and directed by women. It's a mostly female cast. How important was it to have the monster also be portrayed by a woman as well?
Oh, I mean, that was like a no-brainer. The second that I knew we were gonna have enough money to properly have a monster, I instantly was like, I know who I'm gonna call. Because I was friends with Karina Kinnear. I had been watching her, you know, I'm still only 4 years into 5 years into my craft. And Karina is a friend of mine, and I always consult her for like artistic advice because as a dancer, she started dancing so young. So she's, you know, how long are you into dancing?
Too long.
Yeah, you know, over a decade into her craft. So I value her artistry. And so I was like, Karina, I have something very movement based, and I would like your help. And so that's how Karina came onto the project. And so she was on basically like the second we got money. She might have been like the first phone call I made.
And Karina, can you tell us about your experience playing the monster and what you brought to the character?
I was thinking about the roof scene when I was watching it because Emma it was so cold. It was so cold, and she was such a trooper and so professional, amazing. No, I really enjoyed being in this process at the very beginning. I have to say that was really special because they'd been talking about it, so I knew the premise of it, and then we got to really decide what this monster moved like, how it attacked. They determined the scar, and then we kind of determined, well, what would it have to look like to make that? How would it move to really be scary, right? So something and also this fact that it was hunting her. I thought that was really interesting, and so we were able to develop the movement based on that. And that was really, really fun.
And it was a mix of your performance, but also in post visual effects as well. And having an independent film with not a lot of money to work with, how did you guys get around that by adding, you know, the flies and the lighting coming from, you know, the mouth and eyes?
Yeah. Shannalise Barnett single-handedly did all the VFX you saw in the film. She works properly for Viacom on all their TV shows during the day, so I had her for nights and weekends, and it took us close to 17 months to do all the VFX. It's close to 300 shots. You know, I originally had a VFX team on the film, and they came up with this beautiful concept, and I plugged it in, gave away half the money I had for VFX on a single shot, and it dawned on me, I was like, this isn't gonna work, because it cost so much money, and what they were doing was so nuanced and sophisticated. It's the kind of thing that really takes staring at it for like, you know, 4 seconds, which is a lot of frames that you're paying for, because there's 24 frames in a second, so it's way too many. So I was like, fuck, we're fucked. So I found Shannalise, and she was just like a true punk. She was like, what do we need to do? I can do it down and dirty. And so I had sort of a list of goals. I wanted to create something that, you know, escaped the describable. I wanted it to be something that we couldn't put our finger on because Jane couldn't put our finger on it. And so she came up with a great concept, which is every time that you actually saw the monster in the film, it was slightly different than the previous scenes. So like in certain scenes, its torso is dropped much lower than in other scenes. So every time you're looking at it, you're like, I can't even quite tell what I'm looking at. The other thing that was really important to me was to have something that in a snap, the silhouette was distinctly unhuman. I didn't even need monster. I just needed us to clock that something's wrong. And then the third thing that was like really important was the flies. I wanted it to have a silhouette that was distinctly unhuman and have something grounded in the world, because the way that we organically discovered all these scenes, I couldn't come in hot like with a repetitive cue that we're like, cool, the monster's coming because of the dun dun dun, like I've heard that sound before. So I was like, I need to find a sound that's in the world that I can have, and so we know the monster's coming. And so we had already built in the goo that it's sort of like, we sort of had this thought that like perhaps it's got like sort of a cardiovascular system that's like penetrating the fur, like, it's kind of rotting, it stinks, so flies, just like a kind of natural jump from there. And so those were like, that was the foundation of our monster and how we did that.
It is really creepy. Now, Angela, so how did you get involved with the project? You're playing a character, you're playing, her sister, and you don't believe her.
Yeah.
And what was it like to play a character like that? And how did you get involved with the film?
I got involved through Emma. Emma and I worked together, and she was so wonderful to bring me. Wonderful and belligerent to bring me onto the team. And yeah, it was a delight to be involved. Hard to inhabit that role because to see a friend in pain and to not respond the way I would want to respond is hard, but important with storytelling. And so I was really grateful to play that role in the narrative that I think a lot of folks in our culture sort of fall into. I think it's an important part of the story to tell, even though it doesn't feel great.
And with the 4 to 5 years that it's been since you've been working on this film, how has it elevated? How has your relationship with everyone changed as well?
Oh, it's just deepened and deepened and deepened. I mean, every time I'd get a call like, hey, do you want to shoot some more scenes? I'd be like, yeah, great, let's do it.
When you're working on a project for so long,
Yeah.
The people you work with, it becomes like family.
Yeah.
And sometimes family even takes part in the film.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Isn't that right, Mom? So who does Mom play in the film?
Yeah, do you want to tell it? It's just your scene.
This is your scene.
Your mom, though.
My mom plays the scathing, disappointed open house peruser. That
You
the sister
remember her.
did.
You remember her.
We remember her stone cold performance.
This is, when I had first seen the film about a year ago, I was just blown away by it. And we knew we wanted it to be a part of the festival. We feel it's a very important film. You really delivered something special, and we were absolutely honored to be able to present it this year at the world premiere of the film. We hope everyone enjoyed it, but we want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Who has some questions? Yes.
So I noticed there was a lot of themes, like, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff about, trauma, and, the fact that the protagonist wasn't exactly a perfect shell of her own.
Yeah.
But it just made me think about, other people who I've met who have been traumatized by certain assaults in their past, like a friend who's assaulted at a convention.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So it kind of hit deep, but, like, do you have any experience with that? Okay, so sorry, I didn't say it.
Oh no.
No, sorry. Do you know anyone?
Oh well.
Sorry, that was just a bad question.
No, it's a great question, and it's an important one, and I'm glad that you're relating it to real world experiences. And I would bet some serious money that everyone in the audience has a similar story, whether it's them or someone they know, or maybe they don't know that they have a similar story, their friends haven't shared it. PTSD is deeply misunderstood. There are so many ways that it will impact your behavior and that trauma will echo throughout your life, that when you're in a position where the law is written to investigate you as a person and put you on trial as a person, and you're living in this like deep entrenched purity culture that really wants you to be the angelic virgin, if you're not that, it's an uphill battle. Everything that you have can count against you. If you're somebody who has a great sex life, if you drink and you they just tally it up. What were you wearing? Did you drink? What were you doing? The burden is on you. And meanwhile, you're processing trauma, or you're not processing trauma, and you're, either way, your behavior's rocky. You're doing things like you find yourself very sexually active when previously you weren't. You're like, what's that? Oh, it's PTSD. That's crazy. And so, but everyone's watching you. They're like, how are they behaving? But do we believe them, right? And then that's like such a crazy situation to be in. So it was really important to us that we could paint Jane as somebody who was really authentically going through it, and she's a very generous person. Like, she's sharing way more of her story than people generally feel comfortable with, and everybody's just keeping score, and it doesn't look good for her. And so I think that might have answered your.
We very organically wanted to make a story, the traumatic event is one trauma, right?
Yeah.
The attack is one trauma. The aftermath of the trauma is an entirely different trauma.
Yeah.
In so many survivor stories, it's an entirely separate trauma story.
Yeah.
And much of that is based on the way that the community reacts to what has happened. You know, we need recognition and we need retribution for a traumatic event. That's whether or not you're a survivor of a school shooting, or whether or not you've been to war, or you're a sexual assault survivor. All of these things require the community to rally around you in a way that supports that something has actually happened to you. And I think more so than the story of an attack, we wanted to tell the story of what happens after an attack, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to tell what happens when systematically your support system is stripped away from you, and what that feels like, and the horror, the sheer horror of what it is to be left alone in the aftermath of a traumatic event. And so, yes, you know someone, we know someone, unfortunately, we probably all know someone who has experienced something like that. And I think that our goal was to exemplify that one of the ways for us to show healing in this space is to educate ourselves about what trauma looks like, and to require that the systems that are in place to help us and to protect us, that they know implicitly and very detailed the ways that trauma shows up in our lives. And it's, why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you report? Why is your story changing? All of these things are very normal, fear-induced survival responses. And until these are normalized, until we all know it as a community, until we know it, you know, as investigators and prosecutors and people on a judiciary, it's still going to be stigmatized, you know. So that's really what we've been trying to get at, is to make this normal, to understand what it looks like and how it can be messy and weird. And what if we all knew what it looked like to be traumatized, you know?
Well, the film definitely succeeds on that level.
Thank you.
It definitely succeeds. Anyone else have a question? Yes, you sir.
Yeah, I have a question. So obviously there are deep themes of sexual assault, suicide. But my question is, what would be your thoughts? And I don't know if movies do this, on potentially putting some form of trigger warning. I would be curious of your thoughts on that. If y'all ever had conversations about that, it would just be interesting to know.
Yeah, all for it. It would be great if even movie listings showtimes and then had a little asterisk and had trigger warnings. Yeah, I think it's a great thought. I'm glad you flagged it. It's something I will think about as we approach releasing the film worldwide, available on the internet and all that jazz. Yeah, the title cards at the end are really important to me, so I really appreciate the idea of doing it up front.
Yes.
Hey, well, I do have a question, but I just want to say I'm so excited to see women making films like these ladies. Woo! For a second, I am in love with you ladies. But yeah, it's funny because I was hesitant to watch the movie because I was like, might be triggering for me because I was a survivor, and
was like mumbling the words under my mask. I know I could do it in my sleep. But when I was watching this time, I kept thinking like, man, I wish Jane would just take the sister up on that therapy offer. Like,
But at the same time,
yeah,
as who played the sister, I feel like the offer was hollow because I didn't believe her.
Yeah.
So that's not useful.
Yeah.
I mean, therapy's useful. Therapy's very useful.
It's
But you need a community to believe you.
It's interesting watching it like this many years later, and obviously that was like, it's so interesting watching it and remembering like what were the first iterations. Some of this was like first iterations of the script, and some of it was like years later, you know? And those scenes particularly were first iterations of the script, and it's not that they rang hollow to me, you know, I know what you're saying, like your character was offering up, she was just trying to like
She was trying to help.
cover it up,
But,
you know,
Yeah, but not
in a way.
Yeah.
So, and I watched that and I felt the hollowness of it, you know, like you're, in lieu of connecting, how can I offer you a solution? You know, which I think carried out many iterations later, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know how it read to the rest of.
I will say one more thing, which is I think that there's a real opportunity for psychologists who deal specifically in trauma and PTSD to be involved in the writing of the law and the writing of the way the questions are asked to specifically define. There's a lot of commas. A comma in a law can fuck your case up, let me tell you. They're comma in the wrong spot. The word and, the word forcible, we should just never use the word forcible. There are so many really progressive, easy things to do. And having a psychologist look over the language and make sure that it checks out and make sure. And there are rape advocates who can come into hospitals who have generally some sort of background, at least in trauma or like immediate triage of trauma, that can sit with you through that PACE examination, which we briefly showed takes on average 6 hours, generally takes longer. You're naked pretty much the whole time. That can sit with you, so you know, to help you process. I do think mental health is very important. I think it's a huge piece of the conversation, and I think that you know, the community should be involved.
But I will say this character especially, like I related to her, and you know, I've had friends in my life who've been struggling with something or another, you know, not necessarily this, but like I didn't know what else to do except offer like, can I help you find help, you know, and how hard that is to be in this position where you want to fix it, but what do you do? So I don't know, I feel like it touched. I feel like you
I'm gonna ask you guys one more question, but before I do, I just wanna let the audience know that when you guys leave, Gia and the cast are gonna be signing exclusive posters for all of you on your way out. So just make sure to stop by the table to get one. My final question for you is, after all this time working on this film for nearly 5 years, how did you feel watching it on a big screen with an audience and just the reaction to it? Or, you know, just curious what your feelings were on that. Because I know how personal this film was for all of you.
I have a lot of love for you and Igor and Popcorn Frights. It was an amazing chance to share the space with all of you. I appreciate this film community so much. You guys are really killer. I got a chance to watch some of the films, and I just saw the lineup, and it's very kind of groundbreaking horror. You include a lot of voices that are generally, people think that they're not making horror movies, but they are. And it's really special to see it in this kind of community and seeing it so big. I didn't throw up, in case anyone was worried about me. It was actually it was the delight of a lifetime. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for attending, and thanks to everyone for showing up.